Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cheryl Williams. I'm one of the regional parent advisors for the Long Island region, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to It's Okay Not to Be Okay. Before the webinar begins, I would like to go over some housekeeping. This event is being recorded and all attendees are muted for the duration of the webinar. Please use the chat box located on your control panel for any issues or technical challenges that you may be having. Questions and comments for the presenter also goes into the same chat box. During the question and answer session, which we'll be having at the end, we will make every effort to address your questions, but due to the large number of attendants we're having today, if your question is not answered, please note that we are monitoring the chat box and will follow up with questions that we do not answer today. Also, please note that at the end of this webinar, there will be information about a certificate of participation and an evaluation. We ask you to please complete the evaluation. Now I will turn it over to my colleague, Kathleen Leka, who will present our guest.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, welcome. My name is Kathleen Leka, and I am one of the Central Region Parent Advisors with Families Together in New York State. And I must say, especially in these past few months, that it is okay to not be okay. I'm very excited to introduce the first in a series of new and I hope compelling and very productive statewide and regional events. My fellow PAs and I are thrilled to be presenting this first one on this particular subject. What does it mean to you to not be okay and to be okay with feeling that way? For me, it allows me to feel what I'm feeling during the tough times. No matter who we are, what we do for work, or where we live, everyone at some point is going to experience the feeling of not being okay. This can happen at any time, but we all know, especially during these difficult and very unknown times. For me, this statement helps me validate my thoughts and allows me to just feel. Our presenter, Cathy Cave, is a founding partner of Inspired Visions and has over 3 decades of experience in the human services realm. She is indeed a professional who today is going to give us some very valuable information and useful tools. Cathy also understands personally and wholeheartedly what it means when we say it's okay to not be okay. With her dedication to peer support, her very much passion for advocacy, and her use of the strength-based approaches, she has facilitated organizational change at local, state, and national levels. Yet, like all of us here today, Cathy has the lived experience that makes her particularly empathetic and astute to the family, community, and provider perspectives. The parent advisors are happy to call Cathy a friend, and I'm very pleased to welcome Cathy Cave.
Thank you so much. So thank you for welcoming me and thank you for attending, everyone. I thought I'd start in a place this afternoon of actually just doing a really brief breathing activity with everyone. And so what I would ask is that folks participate as best you can and do as much as you can and stretch yourselves as much as you can. And what we know about our challenges today is that there's an absolute impact on mind, body, and spirit. And so if our intention is to acknowledge that, and our intention is to make sure that we're taking active efforts and proactive efforts to support our own healing and our own healing journey, then let's be all in about it, is how I like to think. So the square breathing is a welcome pause. It's a very quick breathing activity that you can do in less than a minute. And of course, you can do for longer if that's something that is helpful to you. So we start with just visualizing a square, and I've provided this square of coffee beans for you to just look at it, just appreciate the size and shape of it for a minute. And then imagine as you're breathing that you're tracing the outside outline of this square. And so that means, and we'll do this together, starting in the bottom right-hand corner. And as you breathe in, You can trace with your hand or just with your eyes, going from the bottom right corner to the top of the square. So breathe in, go from bottom to the top. Exhale, go across the top from the right to left. Inhale, come down from top to bottom. Exhale, go from left to right. And then do that once more on your own count. So again, just tracing the outline. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So one of the things that I'd like us all to be thinking about today is how important it is to pay attention to what's happening in our bodies, to really be thoughtful and about and maintaining connection to what helps us sustain ourselves. Because our world right now is very challenging. So there's how we're thinking and doing in relation to the pandemic that the globe is experiencing. So as we think about, our responses to COVID in New York State, we did a really good job very early on in terms of having leadership that supported wearing masks and giving us facts and really looking at how are we doing and how well are we doing, and to consider that this is not usual. We're doing something extraordinary. At the same time, in late spring, we had this opportunity where, due to a tragedy of George Floyd's death, there's this civil unrest. There's a focus on some deep harms that are happening to people of color. And there's a movement that's saying that even in our state, there are things we need to pay attention to in a different way as we talk about civil rights and social justice. And then again, these are the things that are unusual. So part of what's happening as we're doing our regular day-to-day stuff is we're working in new ways. Many of us are doing virtual things for the first time. Some of us have been doing some virtual contact, some virtual training, some virtual meetings, but now that's an everyday occurrence. And so we're changing the ways that we interact with folks in our programs, in our social circles, in our organizations, in the ways that we even gather information. There's much more dependence on the internet, much more dependence on not being in person to get our needs met and to talk with each other and to connect with each other. Many of us are parenting, so we're parenting and homeschooling while we're working in our homes. And so if there was an intentional approach to, yes, now we work at home, and these are the things we're going to do, and that meant for some folks that has been a benefit, and it's made some things very possible. For others of us, the idea of working from home while we're juggling homeschooling, then there's the summer and what are we doing with the kids and our families, how are we taking care of folks, and then as school is approaching, it brings about a whole new set of where are we now kind of experiences and questions. Many of us are caregiving for family members that are in our home. Our lives are changing, the way that families are living due to financial situations or other concerns. Again, these may be things that happen, in the day-to-day at a much slower pace, but right now, more of us are experiencing these life-changing kinds of things and caring for family members who are also outside of our homes, but we're worried about them because we can't have that contact, or we're wondering if they're okay, or there are ways that we don't know exactly how they're doing. And these are extraordinary times and are really stretching our resiliency, stretching our resources. We are, many of us have lost income in addition to losing the social contact and our other supports where we could usually, pick up the phone, get in our car, make appointments, keep appointments, all of that stuff, and loss of income is really scary right now. So the ways that we are using, food banks and those kinds of resources is changing for many of us. It may be new for folks, it's not new for other folks, but there's certainly some very deep needs present right now for many of us across our state. And then we're grieving those losses. And so for those of us who are, used to leaving our homes and working outside of our homes and coming back and having a routine where we're taking care of things in a different way, we're had to rethink all of that right now. And so it makes sense that we're struggling. It makes sense that this doesn't feel quite right. And even as we are, again, in the ways that, excuse me, we're responding, COVID is something that many of us thought, oh, we'll do this for a few months or a couple of months, or it'll be a few weeks, and then we'll be back to normal. And so we're not there. And although New York had done, again, collectively, we did a really good job of, having more resources in place, having less fear, wearing masks, washing our hands, doing things that make all kinds of sense. But there's also, as this is surging in states across the country, there are some current concerns that we might experience this again. So on top of all of that, there's our everyday stress that was here long before COVID became a thing. So what that includes, and I'm sure there are many more things, and I would invite everyone to please add contributions to the chat box as we're talking. So, as we think about, the impacts of our own experiences and histories, and that includes trauma histories. And so those trauma histories may involve various forms of abuse and neglect, may involve interactions with systems that have been abusive or that harms have happened within those systems. And then there's the day-to-day reminder that harms are still happening to lots of folks. And so I know y'all can't see my picture right this minute, but as a woman of color, just hearing the news every day in terms of what's happening across the country related to civil rights and social justice and just anti-oppression and wanting to take a stand around no more racism. So as all of those conversations are happening and those experiences are on the news every day, what's happening to individuals and youth and families, there's the rest of our trauma histories too. And so as a trauma survivor, and I talk a lot about those experiences, both related to what shows up in family support and how that's informed my approaches there, what's informed my approaches in peer support, and in, just being someone who trains organizations around mental health and substance use and, trauma, and trying to think about leadership as we're doing that. So there's always this cultural lens, and I'm always a person of color. And then there's the news that I have to navigate every single day. And so I try not to overdose on the news, and I try to limit the news, because what it does, it also activates my fear response. And so there are reminders that my own trauma history is often very present in the day-to-day. And I'm acutely aware of that. And it's, this morning there was a story on the news about an experience of a family where, children were handcuffed and face down on the ground. And, those kinds of things bring back all of my, fears and worries, and that's human and normal. So it's okay to not be okay. I want us to deeply appreciate that. I want us to deeply understand that in these moments when we are faced with so much, again, the daily reports about, what are the numbers in New York State and across the country for the number of COVID deaths and the number of COVID testing and positive testing, and how are we doing? So there's constant, it's like a web of worry that is underneath us all the time right now, and that's unusual. But that is also containing the things that we have worries about or concerns about, or things that we advocate all the time about in terms of mental health, and thinking about how folks who have mental health challenges are treated. Do we have the right supports? Do people have access to existing supports? So again, there are so many ways that our worries are compounded every single day. Many of us have experienced, and we lost family members due to suicide. One of the things that's happening right now across the country is that we're noticing when there are increases in spikes in suicide or completed suicides, and really worried about and concerned about and thinking about, ourselves and our loved ones who, have their own concerns about their own health and safety. So again, so much to be rightfully concerned about in the way we navigate the world right now. Substance use is on the rise, overdose is on the rise. And so use and misuse of substances is something that is also, again, part of the things we're concerned about, but also that, we're paying attention to as we're, thinking about where are the needs for support across the state right now. And that is one of our areas and something that we all need to be thinking about. So again, we're stretching our sources of resilience. And there are days like today where after a thunderstorm and constant rain, and some of you all experienced hurricane force winds, that many of us lost power yesterday. Many of us are still cleaning up after all kinds of things that happened as a result of this particular storm. So it's almost like we've got this trifecta of, we've got COVID, we've got civil unrest because we're advocating for human rights and social justice, and we've got this piece around, oh wait, in the middle of all this, and we also had a huge storm. And so I woke up this morning to, yes, our basement had flooded, our roof had leaked, so needing to deal with a whole host of concerns while still having what was in my work day and still thinking about all the things I'm worried about as I spent, half an hour trying to catch up on the news this morning. So we are stretched, and our sources for healing and recovery are also stretched. The way that we connect and sustain our resilience around, so that supports our healing and recovery, also stretched. So I'm wondering if there's anything in the chat box to be shared about what else might be on everyone's mind. So I just want to pause a minute and check and see if there's anything there. All right.
Cathy, this is Kathleen. We seem to be having a little difficulty. Some individuals have written into the question box that they're not able to get to the chat box. So we're working on trying to resolve that issue.
Okay, great. So if at any time anyone would like to add anything, if you're trying to get in and you can't, but you're able to later, that's okay. Please share and we'll try to share your comments out. All right. So there's an impact on our advocacy when we're so stretched and in so many directions. There's an impact on how well we're doing, how well we feel we're doing, whether or not we feel we're doing enough. As an example, I was asked to do a webinar a couple of months ago, and it just happened to be, right after the death of George Floyd. And I felt like anything that I could say about racism and oppression on that particular day, I wondered if what I was saying was enough. I wondered if I was missing an opportunity to make a bigger statement. And I think that's, that's the advocate in me, right? And I think that's true for many of us, that we're wondering and we're thinking about, as we are so stretched, how do we make sure we're doing our absolute best and also worried about whether or not we're connecting, because we don't have that immediate feedback. And so I just wanted to acknowledge how hard it is and the challenges that we're facing in the here and now. So our systems are stretched. So the ways that we, as advocates, look at a challenge and say, okay, what systems do we engage in the solution of this? And so particularly around advocating with and for families, right? There's so many systems that touch families, and wanting to make sure that when there's a challenge and we're trying to be supportive and getting to resolution, that we engage these systems and we have our go-to folks. And right now, our systems are not only are they stretched, they may not be up and running. There may not be the contacts and the ways in and the ways to resolve challenges that we've had access to in the past. our resources are scattered or, just may no longer exist. So many, many, many resources over the past few months have, closed. And so where do people get their food on a regular basis? Where do people get their health care on a regular basis? If you need to see a specialist because your child is having some struggles, can you actually get there? How do we take care of ourselves, by keeping our medical appointments and making sure our medications are up to date, making sure that all the things that we do to maintain our sense of self, that's all working, and the ways and things that we do to engage are in existence. And right now we don't have control at the same time as those resources may no longer be in place. So it's, in some ways, we're starting from the beginning in terms of establishing contacts or reestablishing relationships with maybe it's new players in the systems that we're working with. And so there's all kinds of things that are maybe creating barriers, maybe signaling that we are having to rethink what we're doing and work in different ways. And also that our priorities shift. So what seemed urgent and important, a few months ago, now is second to COVID, or now is second to thinking about, are we attending to racial justice? Maybe secondary to many, many things that are connected to what's important to families. So again, what's still urgent for a family and what might be urgent for us as advocates on, wrapping our arms around families for support and, assistance, that all of that may be impossible to follow through on given the current conditions. And so what that means is that those of us who are providing that kind of support are really struggling with our new ways of connecting, our new ways of trying to connect, and thinking about, how do we do this differently? So I wonder then, if folks notice what that means for how we're holding stress and how we're experiencing stress and how we navigate the stress that we're experiencing. And so, very often, one of the things that happens, I know for me as an advocate, is that it's very easy to be in a mindset of, I'm here, I'm healthy. There are people in the world who have things that are much worse for humans to be dealing with. And I appreciate that, and that the caution around that is each and every one of us matters. And so it's hard for us to show up in the ways that are important to us as advocates when we are not showing up as our best selves. So yeah, it's okay to not be okay. It's really important to recognize when you're not okay, because we feel it in our bodies. We feel that distress. And for me, it's in my shoulders and in my hips, it's in my back. It's in the way that I'm breathing when I'm not paying attention. So our bodies are noticing, and we hold stress, and holding stress for long periods of time without ways that where we're acknowledging it and then trying to unpack it and then trying to do something about it can really be detrimental for individual humans. So it's thinking about that. What can we do differently? I'm hearing it in the language that we use. So what's our tone when we're talking to each other, and the words that we use when we talk to each other? It may be hard to stay patient, and that impatience can spread like a contagion, right? So what does it mean when, to tune in and to really hear ourselves as we're speaking to each other and notice, oh wait, that came out more harsh, more direct, more challenging than I intended. But because of stress, that might be what's happening. And in our communication, we can try to avoid communication because it's just, oh, I can't do it right now. It's too big, it's too much. Or that our communication itself can be aggressive. Again, using ways that we don't intend to use. We also may be seeing the impact of this stress and distress in the ways that we behave towards ourselves and towards others. It takes a lot, for example, to have a routine that you stick with that helps you get motivated, get prepared, get ready for the day, and that the rhythm of that is off right now for many of us. So I know my day starts differently than it used to start. Maybe it takes me a little longer to get ready to go to work. Sometimes I would get, I'd wake up with a thought and I'd, get right on the computer at 7 in the morning because I had this thought and I wanted to create something with that. And so there's maybe less creativity for some of us. So now it's like, I'm going to have another cup of coffee. I'll start at 9, and there's more of that kind of thing. And so again, really lucky, really appreciative that I have work and that I have meaningful work, but there's an impact to how I go about that because things are so distressing, in the world and in our state and in our communities and in our homes. So we also might be sensing it in our attitude, whether it's, our attitude towards work, our attitudes towards our neighbors and community. I'm slightly more annoyed when my neighbor uses a weed whacker. There's something about the tone of that that really makes my shoulders come up around my ears. And so under this level of distress, my shoulders are already, up around my ears. So hearing that weed whacker is just one more thing. And so it can make us, get really rigid in the ways we communicate, in the ways that we connect to one another. We can be rigid about what we are willing and not willing to do. Just a little while ago, I found myself looking in my refrigerator, and that some of the things that were in there on 2 of the shelves were not usually where I put them. Now they were more organized, they were better. My daughter had, really looked at the refrigerator and said, oh, this needs to be reorganized. That's not the best use of space. So it wasn't a conversation, but she had gone in and she moved things, and oh, it's so much better. You can actually see that there is a light in the refrigerator. There's a better use of space, but my first response was, that's not where I put my things. That's not how I do it. And so even though it was better, and even though it made more sense, and even though it created more space, my initial response was, did you just cross a boundary right now? And how did you cross that boundary? And then it was, oh, wait a minute, let me take a breath, because it's the refrigerator. It's where the yogurt goes versus where my seltzer goes, and it's better. So it's that kind of response that we're having in all different places in our lives. So there's examples of that in our homes. There's examples of that in our work. There's examples of that in our interactions with others, in all the places that we might be doing that. So for many of us, our interactions have been limited to the grocery store, and then places where we need to have things urgently taken care of. So that means I've been to the grocery store, the post office, and then one other store where they have multiple things that I need, and they have them on a regular basis. So I go and do that one place so I can do multiple things. But there are days when even those kinds of errands can feel stressful. And so stress can be motivating. So when I notice that I'm out of something, or I wake up with an idea and it's like, oh, I don't have anything to address that idea, but let me go figure that out. Like there's an excitement and a motivation around that. But when things are distressing and distressing over long periods of time, then we can have a very different response. And often that response is undermining our physical health and well-being, our emotional health and well-being, how we're connecting socially to others, and whether or not we're feeling spiritually connected to ourselves and others. So there's a large impact. So it makes sense that given all of these conditions, that we are not okay. And so I wonder, I'm not sure if folks can access the chat box yet, but if you can, to think about, how do you express distress? How do you experience it, and how does that show up? And if anyone, even if anyone who can hear me is able to share, some ideas about how they experience and express distress. And so the example I'll give while folks are thinking about that for a moment is that when I'm scared, it often comes across as anger. And so I have family members with health conditions. I have chronic health conditions. And so we're aware of the impact of that on our lives. And we figured out ways to be really open and to have really good conversations. Just, how are you doing? What do you need today based on how you're doing? But when this added distress is in the mix, I'm finding myself less curious and starting more from a place of, can you make sure that you're taking care of yourself? And it's coming across with this edge because I'm afraid right now. So we often, for my family's medical conditions, are such that when certain signs or symptoms show up, we have to immediately go to the emergency room. And we had that experience back in April. And so the concern is, well, wait, we're maybe at risk for exposure to COVID if we go to the emergency room, but physical health dictates that we have to go to the emergency room. I mean, that is a bind that is so uncomfortable and hard to navigate. And what's worse, the effects of the illness or the effects of the new illness. And how do you make that choice? And so again, really thinking about what does that mean for how we're connecting and how we're expressing ourselves and how we're navigating distress. And so I'm wondering if there's any.
This is Kathleen. Oh, I'm sorry. We did have a few comments that people have been able to put in the question in reference to instead of the chat box. So we did have one person express that the stress of COVID and their own health issues has caused them to become depressed. And they're also, with that, having some concerns about talking to parents about their own stressors, and was wondering if anyone else is feeling that way.
I would say yes to that, yes to that, and yes to that. Yeah, there really is just kind of this, it's almost like everything came together and it's a big ball of yarn or spaghetti, and trying to parse out, what's related to COVID and what's related to my own health conditions. What are the things that I'm impacted by? Like, it's a lot to hold and a lot to think about. And that, yes, absolutely, there are times when we get requests, or someone calls and, when we've opened the door and we've said the door is open, please, contact us. We didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. We didn't know what a struggle this would be and how hard it would be. And so now when we are also struggling, to be able to say, yeah, I'm not so sure I'm in the right place at the right point in my life to be supporting anyone. And so what I would offer is think about, rather than offering advice, being more engaged in more peer support approaches around that, whereas we're sharing experience. And so I might not have an answer for someone else, but what I might have is an opportunity to just share that I too am struggling, and if you found some things to be helpful and I'm finding some things to be helpful, maybe together there are some solutions in that. Kathleen, were there any other comments or questions from folks?
Yes, we had some other comments just in reference to how all of this is affecting their day-to-day. A couple individuals were definitely concerned about marriages currently and the stress on that. One person commented in reference to babysitting for her grandchild, that the babysitter has made the decision not to babysit. So now grandma is babysitting and is having to juggle that plus working. People are very concerned about individuals who have become hospitalized since COVID and the fact that they're not able to visit their loved ones. And I had another person has begun experiencing migraines due to stress and trying to do and deal with everything that's happening. And Heather may have a couple as well, if she'd like to share.
Sure.
Yes, I also noticed what she said, and then I saw that people are very concerned about how their children are going to return to the school year, and they're worried about finances and how they're going to manage everything, and also that people have family members that have illnesses beyond the COVID-19, and they're just as concerned about those as well and having to care for everyone.
That's right.
Just very super stressful.
It is. It really is. And so, given all of these things and all of these experiences, doesn't it make sense that we would be feeling that stress and distress? And so, again, I just think it's super important for us to keep having that kind of conversation and make sure that we have a place where we can be who we are and also say how we really are. So, thank you all for those comments. And I wanted to take a moment and just talk about, distress and trauma and what that looks like. And so, not that everyone is traumatized by their COVID experiences, but we are having this collective experience. And we're having a collective experience of kind of the civil unrest and social justice conversations. And yet we're all impacted as individuals, even from these collective experiences. And so, just a quick piece around what trauma it looks like. There's information from our internal, like our spidey senses, my friend Wilma likes to say, and our sensory sources, right? So what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, any of that can send the message to our brain. The brain sounds the alarm, and a typical response to distress and threat are fight, flight, and freeze. And so there are other ways that folks will talk about that, but in this moment, as part of this brief conversation, what I would say is that just to be aware that our responses to distress are involuntary. And so I might not want to feel bad or feel sad or feel depressed or feel anxious, feel worried. I might not want to feel those things, but I'm feeling those things because our responses are automatic. And we could be aware or unaware of how we're responding. And some of our responses are visible and some would be invisible. And so it's just for us to hold that as we're thinking about, what does it mean to recognize that distress and overwhelm in our own daily lives? So when people are in fight mode, what that might look like in our interactions is aggressive communication, not being able to let go of seemingly small issues, but they become very large issues. And even when there's some resolution or movement, we still want to stay engaged in the fight about that. We have a very, doesn't take much, to ignite our temper, or it doesn't take much to see people as doing the wrong thing. So there's a lot of how that's showing up. The big examples of that are the fights around, who's wearing masks in public and who's not. But some smaller ways that impacts us is what happens in our communication with the people that we are living with in our homes if we're not alone, people that we are, connected to. And we're taking on all these new roles. And while I know that my role as a family member is really important, I don't know that I want extra right now. I mean, I have extra, we're doing extra, but I don't know that I would want extra or ask for that. And so there are things that are uncomfortable. And sometimes it just feels like an itchy shirt and I want it away from me. But other times, I can see that, oh, that's a stress response. That's what happened. I was afraid or I was scared or I was overwhelmed. And so I responded in that way. Another response to think about is flight and what that might look like in our interactions with others. And so how that might look is we avoid interactions. The phone rings, we don't answer it. There's, somebody stops by and we don't go to the door. We know we have to expand our networks a little bit because, we have to go to a doctor's appointment. Maybe we haven't been out in 6 months, but now we got to go out. What does that mean for us? And so the not wanting to do it and wanting to avoid it may fuel and be part of a stress response. And then freeze is often how that looks in relationships or in conversations, is just not present. We are just checked out and gone. And so I might be standing right with you or in the middle of a conversation and then just be in the moment so overwhelmed that no words come out of my mouth and that nothing can happen. And so what this looks like is that we are not as effective as we want to be, we're not as comfortable as we want to be, We're experiencing distress in so many, many ways. I just wanted to pause and check in if there was anything more in the chat.
Yep, this is
Hi,
Kathleen. Oh, go ahead, Heather.
sorry, Kathleen. I just
No, it's
wanted to
fine.
say that, yes, some people talked about how stress shows up in being very irritable and being snappy without intent, and how with youth, we very often say, I hear you, I hear you. And on a personal note, I'll just say that, I wear so many different hats that constantly I don't have enough time to take care of my own self. One time I'll be very overwhelmed making sure that everyone else is being taken care of, that I forget to remember to take care of myself. And sometimes I'm jealous of friends of mine who get to quarantine alone, so to speak, and
Yeah,
they're jealous that I get to quarantine with family, and we like share stories back and forth, and that helps because
yeah.
I get to see the positive that I have and they get to see the positive that they have. So I don't know if any of the other advisors want to say anything. I might have spoken for you, I apologize, but go ahead, Kathleen.
Yep, we just had a couple more comments in reference to how stress is affecting individuals, like Heather had indicated, very disorganized and feeling angry, just as you had stated, Kathy, and becoming very quiet, kind of withdrawing, like you had mentioned, with not answering the phone or the door. And then one that I thought was very interesting is one of our attendees had posted in reference to working from home. And she has a child with autism. And so therefore, some of the individuals that she's communicating with, via telehealth or Zoom have begun to appreciate what her day looks like and what types of things that she's juggling, working, and then also supporting this child that needs her attention. So I thought that was extremely important to mention.
Thank you so much for that. Yep, wisdom in those words for sure. Right, so before we talk about stress and distress, I wanted to do one more kind of grounding and centering activity. And so with this, it's called 5 Things, and I would ask everyone to have, if you have a beverage near you or a snack near you, the last thing I'm going to ask of you in this activity is to taste it. But before we do that, it's called 5 Things. Look around and find 5 different colors, just from wherever you're sitting, just notice. So in my space, I've got green and dark blue and yellow and orange and white and brown and black. Just notice 5 different colors. Reach out your hand and touch 4 different textures. Just 4 things. Notice how they feel differently under your fingertips. Notice 3 different sounds. I've got a buzz on my computer. There's a buzz from a fan. I can hear, if I listen really closely, there's a couple of birds outside. Notice 2 different smells. So one of my smells that I'm offering is from a flavored water that I have, and the other is I have a grapefruit scented lotion that I'm putting on my hands right now. And it's just given me like this little bit of a 30-second, 1-minute vacation. And I can smell grapefruit. And then the last thing I would do is find one thing that you can taste. So whatever snack or beverage you have near you, go ahead and taste it. And so that is called 5 Things, and it's a grounding activity. And so we're going to talk about the importance of activities that offer grounding in a few minutes. And that one of the big important takeaways is that mind-body practices help counter the physical distress in our bodies and the sense of dysregulation. So I'm going to talk about what dysregulation is. Dysregulation is that sense of that things are not coming together for us in the ways that we want. And so we might have jumbled thoughts or racing thoughts, or not be able to put two thoughts together. We might have dysregulated emotions. So there's a range of things, and they might be happening quickly. So I might be, very, sad and depressed, and I also might be, crying, and that might change from that to just a lot of anxiety and worry and very fast movement and moving around. I might feel happy because something joyful happened, but then recognize that, oh wait, how can I be happy when there's so much death in the world and there's so much destruction in the world? So it's this range of ways that our thoughts and our emotions and our energy is experienced. So a physical awareness of where our body is even in a space. We might, not hold on to what that even means. And so we might not notice that we're standing very close to someone because we're so internally focused that we're not even noticing where others are, or that I maybe wanted to go to a place or to be like in my yard by the tree, but I got to my front porch and I forgot exactly where I was going, and I just couldn't get myself to move off the front step. People are experiencing a lot of these kinds of feelings and ways that their energy is working. The way that energy can be dysregulated is that sometimes we can be revved up and fast moving, other times we just want to be sleeping, and that those extremes, either one of those, can last for days or weeks. And that because things feel so disjointed and don't feel the same, don't feel familiar, we can lose our sense of safety and lose our sense of connection to other people. And so that can happen because of distress at any time. But then when you add on the extra layers of things that are distressing that we're experiencing right now, that it makes absolute sense that we would feel that disconnected. And that would be the impact of that disconnection, is that we often don't feel safe with people or in spaces that we used to feel safe and connected to. And so one last piece to think about with dysregulation is our presence in the here and now. So there may be folks experiencing flashbacks right now. There may be folks who are having trouble staying connected to the present, and either our worry and anxiety puts us more focused in the future, and that depression often keeps us kind of rooted in the past, and it's hard to even think about what the present might hold. So again, it's just thinking about all of the regular things that we worry about in connection to mental health and substance use, suicide and suicide prevention, and that all of these are very real distressors, and we have a pandemic. And so the way that distress looks like this, and how we navigate distress and try to sort out feeling better is important. So as we're thinking about this, how we're coping now may be different from what we used to do. And what we used to do maybe worked really, really well for us, but what we're finding is in this new situation, it's not working as well. So we may find ourselves less flexible, less responsive, less open, less creative, less productive, less present, and absolutely, absolutely more exhausted. And so sleep is one of those chicken and egg kinds of things, where if you're not getting enough sleep, you can have more chronic pain, more distress, more, feeling more of our trauma and trauma responses, really feeling very rigid. Sleep can do all of that. And then when you don't get sleep, you're open to more distress, right? So just sleep helps alleviate stress. When you don't get sleep, you tend to be more stressful. More stress prevents us from sleeping well. So again, it's just really challenging. And then we may feel like we need to hide how overwhelmed we feel and not let folks know. So, how can I say I'm so depressed, or I'm so distressed, or I'm anxious and I'm super worried? How do we do that when people are asking us for advice? And so that's what I was speaking to earlier about. Maybe it's letting go of trying to be the advice giver and expert person, and be open to more mutuality and saying, yeah, I'm experiencing that as well. You know, how do we just name that we're having challenges and that we're struggling? So stigma and fear also play into whether or not we're open to talking about how we're really doing, but also being noticed as not feeling emotionally well. And so many of us on this call spend a great deal, or in this meeting rather, spend a great deal of our time combating stigma against folks who have mental health challenges. And yet stigma still can often shape how open we are about how we're doing, and also play into the fear of being noticed. So I just wanted to point that out as something that we need to be mindful of, and really important to practice what we preach right now in terms of being open and being present and trying to do things that support us and allow us to stay open and present. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how culture informs us, right? It informs how we approach our work, what we believe is helpful, what we believe, helps us heal when we're not feeling well, when we're sick, even what kinds of ethic we bring to the work and our professionalism, what kinds of sources of resilience we have. Culture can shape that. And so what we're experiencing right now, as I said earlier, may be calling on us to rethink and reframe how we manage. So it may mean looking at, what are our cultural roots? What is it that work for us? What works well? And engage in more culturally based healing, or the things that bring that soothing energy. So when I talk about mind-body healing practices, I want us to really understand that there's science behind why these practices work. It's not just a good idea to deep breathe. It's a great idea to deep breathe. It's not just a good idea to move your body. Our health improves when we move our bodies. And so some of us, again, come to these things from all kinds of ways. So from my family of origin, I learned, at a very young age, what are you supposed to do when you're not feeling well? But from my family of choice and my communities of choice, I learned a lot about what does it mean for me now? And so if we're not connecting with others and we're more isolated, we're not having some of the conversations that are really important for us to have and to share with others. So just wanting to notice that, and encourage folks to comment about things they may have had to rethink or reframe to manage better right now. And so along with that comes this notion of, can we be honest? And so I do a lot of coaching of leaders. And one of the things that I've heard a lot of, leaders, program directors and supervisors, people who are the leads of departments and that sort of thing, they're explaining, why didn't staff tell me they were overwhelmed? And so we have to look at that then around what's the culture of our organizations. Are people able to say, I'm not functioning well right now, and I'm not sure if I can talk about that? And so that is something for us to think about. And so one of the beauties of peer support and family advocacy is, in these arenas, more than almost any place else I work, there is a freedom to be who you are. And so rather than be afraid of saying, this is how I'm doing, this is what's happening for me, let's open it up and be authentic about how I'm doing and what's happening for me. So being authentic and valuing that authenticity really means that we do have spaces where we can be ourselves as we are, and come as we are, say who we are, use the resources and tools that we have, but also say, you know what, my tools and resources are tapped out. And so I need to find some places. So I ask you, where are your resources where you can show up as you are and be honest about how you feel? And again, I would encourage folks to, respond to that in the chat. And just for us to think about what's in the way of accessing your resources. So for me, what's often in the way is time. And so as I'm, juggling a lot right now, I'm also grateful to have work. So I've been either not saying no or saying no to less things, but trying to cram too many things in too short a period of time. And so what was in the way of me actually accessing my resources was that I was too busy doing the work to actually spend time to make sure that I'm okay for the work that I'm doing. And so again, I would ask folks to think about that. So I want to just pause a minute and see if there's anything else in the chat right now for us to think about.
Yep, hi Cathy, this is Kathleen again. In reference to your value authenticity, someone had put in the box, putting on a positive front to others, trying to hide how overwhelmed and exhausted I really am, and also recognizing I'm getting exhausted and overwhelmed much easier than I had previously.
Yeah.
We also had someone express that they're feeling a lack of connection to work because they're not in the office and they're working from home. So they're working pretty much without a team, and it also feels very isolating and lonely, and is sometimes questioning the purpose of the work that they're doing currently.
That is right. That is right. So thank you for sharing all of that. So in regard to the first comment, I had an amazing conversation with a colleague of mine and colleague and friend. You know, we've worked together over a number of years and we have a really good relationship. And one of the things, we were trying to schedule something that we're doing together, and just in passing, she said, you know, well, I don't schedule calls and meetings until after 11 o'clock. And I was just like so amazed by that. And it was like, wait, just what? That just like passed by me really fast. And so we talked about that, right? And one of the things she said is that gives me time every morning to make sure that I have prepared myself for the conversations that I want to have, meaning that I've eaten, that I'm hydrated, that I've done some meditation, that I've had some time to, you know, refill my own cup, and then engage in calls and meetings and conversations that are going to pull from my cup. And another friend of mine always likes to say, you can't drink from an empty cup. And so these two conversations together really reminded me that even when it feels like there's so much that we don't have control over, there are things that we do have control over. And that some of those things are the ways that we navigate and take care of ourselves. We have control over that. And so to just be thoughtful about what we can do differently before we just say yes. I also wanted to speak to the second comment about the importance of organizational culture. And so our companies, our organizations, whatever places that we work, there is a way of doing things. So the way we do things in any program, that's organizational culture. How it feels to work there is organizational climate. And certainly the pandemic has stretched our organizational culture, our sense of being connected to it, has stretched our views about the climate and what it feels like to be part of an organization and to work there. And so leaders of organizations have to do very deliberate things to sustain the organizational culture. And so how we connect virtually is not the same as passing by someone in the hall and saying, hey, I was thinking about you. How did that thing go with your family last night? Like, we're not having those kinds of conversations. And if we are, we're not having them frequently enough. So this is a call for all of us who work in programs to really do an extra next step of thinking about how do we maintain connection over time and over fear and all of the doubts that we have that we've been talking about since we started this conversation today. So really important things for us to keep in mind, and also to take actions that support us as we do the work. So the next activity I'm going to ask you all to try is right over your heart. If you put your right hand over your heart, there's a tender spot there that you might notice that when you touch it, there's a little bit of tenderness. And so when we're stressed and feeling distress, that is a place that actually holds a lot of the pain that we're having. And if you touch that spot or gently rub it, you can help get yourself grounded and centered and connected. And so in gratitude practice, what I would ask folks to do is just put your hand in that spot over your heart and just say out loud or say to yourself, I appreciate blank, and then just fill in the blank. So for me, my hand is over my heart. I found that tender spot because I'm holding a lot of stress. I know exactly where that is, but I'm touching that spot right now and I'm saying, I appreciate my family. And then just take a deep breath in and let it out. So gratitude practice does not have to be a deep spiritual or religious thing, but it often is, and it often brings about an opportunity for appreciating something that you may not have acknowledged. And it may even inspire us to say to the people that are involved, that we have gratitude towards, to say that to them, I appreciate you, and to notice. So we're going to talk about a few more resources that support resilience. All right. Excuse me. So healing from trauma requires control over our environments, a sense of both physical and emotional safety, an ability to trust ourselves and the decisions that we make. So really thinking about trusting ourselves, to notice when we're struggling and to do something to make a change in that, and to be active in the pursuit and then looking for and finding others that we can connect to in new ways. And so maintaining that connection with trustworthy others is really essential. So thinking about ways that we do that in our organizations and in our work. And so to be our best selves, what do we need? Is a question that I often like to ask and would invite folks again to chat about. And to really be thoughtful about what does that look like when I say, I'm trying to bring my best self to my work today. What do I need to do that? Well, for me, I might need support from the people that I'm working with that day, so that we can recognize for each other and in each other that the stress is real, that the impact is real, and that, there are times when we need to acknowledge that we're stressing right now, and how important that is. We might need to also think about what are the tools and resources that are in our toolbox and how do we add more things. So I want to talk a little bit about how mind-body practices help, because I've offered a number of them. So I want to spend a little bit of time here talking about that, and then to demonstrate a few quick other practices as we move along. So mind-body practices actually calm the central nervous system. And so they address the dysregulation and the impact of trauma. So this isn't just a good idea, it's something that actually helps lessen our distress and handles the source of that distress and the places where we hold it. So when I do certain practices, if I do body movements, there's less stress in my hips, there's less stress in my shoulders. If I do breathing, I am opening up my chest a little bit more, so I'm actually getting in more oxygen, which is much better for my body as I have asthma and I have allergies. These practices are free, they're reliable, and they're always accessible, and we can share what we're learning. So one of the things that I like to think that's low-hanging fruit is that anyone that you're working with, anytime that you're connecting with others, in those first few minutes, one, ask how are you doing? Like do a real check-in with one another. And second, to share the things that are helping to lessen distress. So, hey, I had this new practice I learned about today, right? Or, hey, I have this new app that I'm trying that, tells me to set a reminder for when it's 9 o'clock so I can start winding down from my day. And because I like to go to bed at around 11. So I get another reminder at about 10 of 11 that cues me up, says, you know what, it's time. Because we know the sleep is so important. Having a sleep routine is going to be really helpful. And so making sure that I go into bed, 11 or a little bit thereafter, but I'm not snacking done. I'm all done with my snacks. I'm all done with my beverage. I'm all done with television, and I can just go to sleep. So there are apps that can set those reminders. And I had this great one that I discovered just a couple of weeks ago, and I set it to come up on my computer. And then every 90 minutes, I get a picture of these pine trees, or palm trees rather, and for 30 seconds, it just shows this picture of palm trees and is a cue for me to just to do some breathing. So I'm not typing, I'm not reading, I just take for 30 seconds, breathe, and what that means in that 30 seconds. And so there's all kinds of ways that we can do things. It builds trust for ourselves because it reinforces our capacity to know that we have skills, we have talents, we can be creative. We're just not tapping into that right now. And so it allows us to do that. And so it also, mind body practices, support general wellness and offer us some prevention. And so we can be less stress, or we can avoid stress. And so those activities, what they look like are breath work. So we did a breathing activity. Body movement, one I would offer is actually standing up and if you don't want to stand, you can also do it sitting, but to put your hands on your hips and just put your shoulders back and open your chest up. And again, just that stretch is good for us, right? Sometimes we need faster stretches or faster kinds of body movements to alleviate stress. And so then one thing you can do is sit in your chair and just stomp your feet on the floor really fast. And you can use your hands and hit your thighs as you're moving your legs really fast and stomping your feet on the floor. And that can provide some energy and get you out of a slump, or help you co-regulate. Means that we do something together. So if we're breathing together or stomping our feet together, that is also helpful in connecting and building community. Meditation can be challenging for folks, but you can just focus on something, visualize something, and repeat a sentence or a quote that feels good to you, or you can do 20 minutes of meditation. So anything that helps us self-soothe is really helpful. And then for grounding, I wanted to share something from my absolutely most favorite website now. It's called the Virtual Room. And so I was checking out the Virtual Room last week, and there was a 2-page sheet that it was easy to print, it was easy to share, on grounding, and talking about how grounding is helpful, things you can do like count to 10 really slowly, thinking about things like, we're washing our hands a lot right now. So the next time you wash your hands, do it slowly, actually notice what's happening and what it feels like, and then how you rinse the soap off and what that feels like. It's just paying attention and imagining that you're in a peaceful place, imagining that you are doing all right, imagining that this will pass, the distress you're feeling will pass, and those things get to become true. And then really taking breaks, like walking away and stopping what we're doing. So I wanted to share these 2 activities in particular because they're helpful for those of us who are parenting, and they're easy to teach to kids. And so if you can hold up your hand in front of you, and it doesn't matter which hand, but you want to put your index finger, that's your pointer, put it at the base of the thumb of your other hand. And so as you are breathing in, another way to talk about finger breathing is hills and valleys. And so as you move your finger from the base of your thumb to the tip of your thumb, breathe in. As you go down from the top of your thumb to that space between your thumb and your index finger, that valley, exhale. Inhale as you trace your index finger to the top. Exhale, coming down in between your index finger and your middle finger. Inhale, going to the top of your middle finger. Exhale, going down that valley. And you can do that over and over as many times as you like, going up and down and tracing the outline of each of your 5 fingers. And what that does is it gives you something visual to do, but there's also an extra sensory piece to that that gives you something concrete to touch, which is your own hand, but you're doing it in a way that's thoughtful and different than usual. So that can be really helpful. The finger holds exercise, how you do that is that every single one of our fingers has pressure points. And those pressure points, when you hold them, help alleviate stress. So if you use, so I'm right-handed, so I have my left hand in front of stretched out in front of me. I'm going to take my right hand and wrap it around my thumb. So if I'm experiencing grief, I'm going to hold my thumb for 5 minutes or so and just think about what I'm grieving and just breathe. Regular breath, nothing fancy. And then let's say I'm feeling fear, I'm feeling panicky. I'm going to take my right hand and cover my whole entire index finger. So all the points there. And I'm going to think about, what am I afraid of? Can I let it go? And I'm going to breathe. Middle finger is for anger and gives us something much more productive to do with that middle finger. And it's holding all the pressure points and breathing in, thinking about the source of that anger, and then letting it subside. Ring finger is next, and that's for worry. And then our little finger, our pinky, that is for when we're not quite feeling our full selves, or we have low self-esteem, not thinking that we matter, holding those points and breathing. So one of the handouts that will be available to you is called Enhancing Personal Capacity for Wellness, and it's a guide. So this was created when SAMHSA funded a national wellness project, and it's really geared towards people who provide peer support and family support, and for our parent advisors, of course. And thinking about different ways that when we're feeling stressed, sometimes it's connected to we're not recognizing how we have let go of mutuality, that we start seeing our role as something that we can control and make other people better and make other people feel things, make other people make decisions. And that's not our job. Our job is to help folks see their options and to be where they're with them side by side while they explore those options. So that guide is an incredibly helpful resource. We've gotten a lot of feedback on it over the years and just wanted to offer that as a helpful handout. So as we're supporting others, it's thinking about, can we be curious? Can we keep our commitment to learning? Can we incorporate mind-body practices? Are we open to sharing? Because it's a way of taking action that is different for us. It's new for us. And it's not the same taking action that we're used to, but it's a different way of going about that. And when we actually ask folks at every conversation, at the start of every conversation, is there anything that would be helpful for us to do where you could feel more safe and more comfortable while we're talking? When that simple sentence opens up the door for people to have a different kind of conversation. So then we can work together thinking about our physical safety and working together to think about our emotional safety. I know that I am not powerful enough to provide physical and emotional safety for another human being. What I can do is work to be trustworthy. I can work to maintain dignity and respect for your choices and options. I can work on myself and the way that I'm showing up to be sure that I'm open, that I'm wanting to collaborate, that I'm participating in conversations in a way that honors the dignity, respect, and choice of others. And so when I say, we're starting a conversation and is there anything that we can do to help feel more safe and comfortable, what that does is it recognizes and acknowledges we are in unusual times. We are definitely having experiences that are new for all of us. And can we just recognize that none of us are experts on that? So we're trying. And as we're trying, these are the things that we're doing together. So how about if we start conversations in this more open, more flexible place rather than, hi, I'm Cathy and what can I do for you? It's, hi, I'm Cathy and are there things that we can do to try to make our conversation more safe and more comfortable today while we're talking? And so one of the, again, just kind of a general approach to things for us to think about is that we include a focus on well-being for everyone. So it's okay for everybody not to be okay, given the conditions, and that we're actively working to try to be okay and to try to do things that actually help center us and ground us and connect us to one another. So that means having strategies, for ourselves as individuals, but also talking at our programs about what are the ways that we can contribute to the wellness of each other and the wellness of our organization as a whole. What are the things that we can do to counter the impact of distress and trauma and say, what we want to do is incorporate more mind-body healing because that counters that distress. And let's be open and flexible and offer options, consider options, and invite everyone to participate in creating those options. And probably the most important thing of all of this is really making space for joy. So I wanted to press pause a minute and kind of see if there's anything in the chat or if anybody has questions. And I have one more activity that I want to do when we finish. If there's any questions or things for us to discuss. And then I have another page of resources that I wanted to share. So Kathleen, I'll check in with you. Do we have anything in the chat box to respond?
We had one person, well, we've had several comments with other folks putting things in the box, appreciating people sharing what they've been sharing. So that was nice. We have one person that was talking about that they take every Sunday off to reboot for their mind, their body, and their soul, spiritually and mentally. And they really try very hard to focus on, the day and taking time for themselves. One of the questions someone asked, which is I think a lot of us are thinking, is the concern for returning to the office and maybe not being okay with that. Wearing a mask all day is so hot. This person has some concerns with some medical concerns and wonders if there's something out there that folks can do or refer to that would protect themselves from having to return to the office.
Yeah, I think good things to explore. So a couple things to do is to have real direct conversations with the folks where you work. And so the best way to really think about that is, what's the current science on how COVID is spread? And are there ways that we can protect ourselves and what makes good sense? And so lots of organizations are doing things like having staggered work schedules. So yes, people are back in the office. Some people come in on Monday and Wednesday. Some people come in on Wednesday and Thursday. Maybe somebody different comes in on Fridays. So people are staggering their workspace, staggering the work schedule, so that there's less happening and less people in the workspace, and also doing the disinfectant cleaning every single day. Another organization where I've been having this conversation, folks are doing that, but in addition, every single person has a spray bottle of the disinfectant that they use and wipes that they use. And so everyone is responsible for wiping their phones down, wiping their desk areas down, wiping the doorknobs, and people are doing it multiple times a day because they're having that kind of concern. But what people talked about with that is not that they want to take jobs away from folks who do the cleaning, but this is for doing in between the times that the cleaners are cleaning. And so thinking about strategies that make it less stressful to return because people feel more safe about the way they're returning. And those are absolutely valid conversations to bring to the leadership of your work settings. And so again, there's lots of stuff online about that and how to do that. I think one of the other things is that there's an organization where I work. We provide technical assistance, for lots of different things. But one of the things that a group of us created was a tip sheet around thinking about COVID and how we're taking care of our kids. What are the ways that we can feel, to support kids and to support parents, and talking about COVID and doing the homeschooling and doing. And so that's something that is available publicly, and I can absolutely forward that, and so it can be shared across your networks. And then another thing that folks are doing is actually talking about, what it means to provide services in this COVID-19 environment. And so ways to talk with people about wearing a face mask if you are coming in for an appointment, and what does that mean? So, the fears are not unfounded, but what it really means is that we have to have conversations in our workspaces about how we're navigating, and really take it to heart and really think about that. And again, it's like, there isn't any one way, because there isn't any one way. So what I would like to say is that even makes it more important for having the kinds of conversations that we are having, and to make sure that if there is uncertainty and concern, that you raise those concerns in the places with people who need to hear them.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Heather Tafuro. I have some other comments, positive comments that I wanted to make sure we shared as well. Someone shared that it's very important to make sure that they articulate a sense of purpose every single day, to just kind of make sure their head is on straight. And another woman said that she has a great supervisor who always provides time for her to make sure she has time for herself, and she provides resources and supports for her. And also that it's very important to have a group of people who are supportive for each other, who have the same articulate sense of purpose, and that you have your values and your philosophy and your sense of mission are very important during these sensitive times. And that it's very important also that we have a group of friends that we can talk and spend time with, where we don't speak about politics or problems, but rather we focus on values and our spirituality, whatever that may be determined.
Love that. Love that.
I can't take ownership, it was someone else.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure it was shared.
Yeah, thank you. And I think in particular what's important is that we don't lose our sense of purpose. And so all of us that do this work, and that's kind of what I was getting at with the, like, we have culturally based beliefs, and we have, beliefs around our purpose in the world, our place in the world, that says to us, this is what's important about our work, about our ethic. We can all be working in lots of places. Human services is not easy. The ways that we support each other is often very challenging. What we're trying to do is often very challenging. So if we're doing this work with human beings, it's because we're driven and we are passionate about these connections and the kind of work we do. And so trying to maintain that sense of purpose when you're in isolation is really challenging. So having a place and a purpose and a way to acknowledge that purpose, really important. So thank you. And it can also be part of your gratitude practice. And so one last break I wanted to kind of bring for us. There's a woman named Kristen Neff, and you can look up her website, and she's all about self-compassion. And so there's a way that you can, again, think about what you're experiencing and what would be helpful to heal what you're experiencing. So a self-compassion break is getting very comfortable in your seat, and if you're having some strong feelings, you actually want to press pause. So you can put your hand by your heart, and that same really tender spot over your heart might be a good place, and just acknowledge that something you're experiencing was really hard, it was scary, it was painful, it was frustrating. For me, I might say, and given the last comment, I might even say I'm struggling to find my purpose, and that's really hard. to acknowledge that everyone feels this way, that that's really human. And it's a reminder to say, may I be kind to myself and give myself the compassion and acknowledge that we need that compassion. So when you can say, yes, I need this and I need this for myself, it just gives us a moment. And you can also share, again, this practice with other people. So some resources that I wanted to share. Virtual Room of Refuge is the one that's my very new favorite, and I love it very much. Millie Greneau talks about 60-second strategies for balance in a busy world. So things that are deliberately a minute long that we can do to take breaks, to refresh, to replenish, to refill our cups so that we are grounded, centered, and connected. And so these are some things I wanted to share. And when you download the PowerPoint, you'll have that. And I just wanted to thank everybody for sharing all along today and for adding to the chat box. So as we're wrapping up, to please make sure that you do evaluation and provide some feedback. And I'm wondering if Kathleen or anyone has any last word to share with the group.
Yes, hi, Kathy. It's Barbara Callahan. I'm the parent advisor in the Hudson River region. And from Families Together and all of the parent advisors, I'd like to thank you for delivering always thoughtful and thought-provoking and informative trainings. Kathy, you've been a long-standing and sought-after presenter at Families Together conferences. And once again, you've captivated our audiences, and this time online. Again, thank you, Kathy, for your invaluable time and flexibility. Before we close, I would like to ask everyone to fill out the evaluation, which will show up at the end of this presentation. It's important that we have those evaluations filled out. They help us to bring future training opportunities to you, and we appreciate your time and effort in doing that. Lastly, the recording of It's Okay to Not Be Okay, along with the PowerPoint and handouts, will soon be available on the Parent Advisor page of the Families Together website. An email with more information will go out shortly, and we hope you all enjoyed the training and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.